Hey friends, this is the Mrs. Volfie from our Half Acre Homestead. This is an important message for chronic pain sufferers and fibromyalgia sufferers. Now, I just realized that for the last 4 or 5 days, I have been fighting strep throat. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of medical history to explain why I didn't recognize it for what it is. I remember strep throat as extremely painful, like drinking water was trying to swallow razor blades. Now, the last time I had strep throat treated by a doctor was over 22 years ago. How do I know this? Or how do I remember the date? Because it was just prior to me getting pregnant with my son, Briar. Now, they have traced fibromyalgia back to starting in your hands. This first sign of it is problems with your hands. Now, before I got pregnant with Briar, I got strep throat. Now, I don't know if anybody else suffers from this, but there are several members of my immediate family that suffer and have suffered this. One of them was my father. We have a tendency not to develop. We get fevers, but we don't necessarily develop the elevated temperature like other people do. So when a doctor says, nope, you got no temperature, your blood pressure is normal, you're not sick, is not necessarily true for some people like me. And when I proved this to my doctor. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit foggy, because yes, I am not well. I proved this to my family doctor 22 years ago when I developed strep throat, and I finally went to the doctor. And the nurse came in to the examination room. She took my temperature, she took my blood pressure, all those things that they do before the doctor comes in to see you. And then the doctor came in and he said, I hear you've got a sore throat. I said, no, I have strep throat. And he went, and the first thing he did was looked at what the nurse wrote. No temperature, no elevated temperature, no elevated blood pressure. You don't have an infection. And then he looked in my throat. And I'm not kidding, folks. He went, oh, that's gotta hurt. And I said, yeah, it does. He said, I'm going to do a swab, and I apologize that I have to do this because it was going to be painful. He said, I'm going to do a swab and I'm going to send it away just for verification, but I'm going to put you on antibiotics right away. You definitely have a really bad case of strep throat. Now, several months later, I was pregnant with my son, and I started to develop, I was knitting and sewing and quilting, and I was developing numbness and pain in my hands, and my hands would only let me knit or hold a book or anything for so long. We now know that's one of the first signs of the beginning of fibromyalgia. It could be, I had carpal tunnel surgery and it didn't work. Why? Because it wasn't necessarily carpal tunnel. It was the beginnings of fibromyalgia. This is how they've traced it back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you do some research and you'll find that out. This is a recent development with fibromyalgia. My point is, after 22 years of fibromyalgia and all the tests that go along with it, my body no longer recognizes pain the same way. When we came home from Ohio, the motel we stayed in was beautiful. It was a beautiful place. It was the Comfort Suites. The problem was there was only one minor hiccup, and that's with all the rain that Ohio had been getting and the tri-state area had been getting. They didn't run the air conditioners in the rooms because air conditioners will take moisture out of the room to a certain degree. They ran the fans, and the fans on the air conditioner pull air in from the outside. And so our room was really, really damp. Damp to the point where that when you slid between the sheets, you could feel the dampness, and you didn't really warm up until your body temperature warmed up the sheets. Once we were there, after about 24 hours, we used the air conditioner and tweaked the temperature so that it wasn't cold, but it wasn't hot either. But the dampness started to come off the room. But I got sick, and I didn't know I was sick. When I came home, the video you saw in Home Again, I felt like I had been put through a ringer and all that stuff. I didn't realize I was sick. And then I woke up on Monday morning with what I thought was a dry, scratchy throat, and the back of my sinuses felt really dry, and I didn't realize I was sick. I just thought it was the fan blowing on me all night. Okay? Now remember, folks, I don't necessarily get an elevated temperature when I have an infection. So that throws the take your temperature, and if you've got a temperature, you got an infection. That kind of throws that right out the window. That does not mean I don't get a fever. Temperature and fever are not necessarily the same thing. An elevated temperature is a result of a fever going on in your body. Your body is fighting off illness, and the fight elevates your temperature. Unless you're someone like me, okay? The last time I had a temperature of 101, I was hallucinating, and I had like double pneumonia. Or bronchial pneumonia, whatever it was. It was a long, long time ago. Anyway, my point is that after 22 years of pain, my body doesn't recognize pain the same way, so I did not know I have strep throat. Because it no longer feels like I'm swallowing razor blades. It just hurts. It just hurts to swallow. But it doesn't hurt. It's not like swallowing razor blades. Because my body, says, oh, please, strep throat. That's nothing compared to what you deal with on pain on a daily basis. And so your brain kind of files that back into into a system of what's really bad pain and what's livable pain. If that makes any sense whatsoever, you got to remember I'm sick right now. So I had to piece this all together after 4 or 5 days. It's now Saturday, July 25th, 2015. And I'm just now realizing at the end of the illness, or as I'm getting more cognizant of what's going on around me, that I've been really sick. Now, no, I didn't go to the doctor, and no, I didn't do antibiotics because I choose not to use antibiotics unless it's an absolute last-ditch effort, because they don't necessarily work, or my body builds up a resistance to them. And then when I really, really need them, like I've had surgery and I've got a mass infection or something, then the antibiotics won't work because I used them recently. Okay, so I don't do antibiotics unless it's an absolute last-ditch measure. But how I ended up recognizing it is when I clear my throat, I would get stuff, infectious bits. Let's put it nicely. Bits of infection would pop out. And I wasn't drinking my hot tea like I normally do. I went 2 days without a cup of tea, and anybody who knows me knows that's extremely rare. Because my body automatically knows what works and what doesn't. I've been craving stewed tomatoes, vitamin C. So I started craving stewed tomatoes for vitamin C. I've been drinking ice water and sweet tea and not hot tea. Why? Because in hot tea I use milk, and milk is not something you should be putting into your body when you have infectious phlegm things. You don't do dairy, okay? So I started cluing in. And right now I'm actually feel like I'm running a fever. I get all these symptoms of a fever. I get the twitchiness, the muscle aches, and that was another thing. I woke up with a lot of pain, and I thought it was from traveling. The muscle aches, the muscle twitches, the lightning bolts around my vision that I used to think was the onset of a migraine, which it is sometimes, but it also is an onset of a fever. So I guess my point is, and I've run on long enough, is if you suffer from fibromyalgia or arthritis or any kind of bad chronic pain issue, please pay attention to the minor illnesses that you're just fluffing off as a cold, because it could be something much, much worse. You just don't recognize it the same way as you did before the onset of your chronic pain issues. This is the Mrs. Volfie from Our Half Acre Homestead saying, it pays to listen to your body. It talks to you. You just got to know how to listen. Take care. Bye-bye.